picture of me?
I'm relentless.
Huh?
Yeah.
Are you wearing my belt?
No, he got his own belt.
Huh?
He got his own belt.
Did you buy your own belt?
He got his own
Yeah, I
belt
did.
today.
That's why it smells what?
Really?
It's full,
Good.
so I had to leave a message.
So where's
for the
my belt?
secretary. I just said
Boy, what a long nose I've got. Xander, did you buy a belt?
yeah.
Uh-huh. All right, then give me my belt because mine is a reversible belt.
Okay.
And I have a reversible buckle. And I'll get rid of the leather and buy a new leather belt.
Okay, we'll do, Grandpa.
I actually don't have a.
I don't think I'll just call him on Wednesday. You know.
When Grandma was
Give him a couple
alive, she
days.
always knew where you can buy
I don't want
things.
to bug him.
If I wanted to buy a belt, she'd call and she'd get the belt for me. As I said, the Bronx is much more densely populated. You didn't see so many people in the street all the time. You didn't see too many people in the street at all. There's Yankee Stadium coming into view.
Oh yeah, there's the back Yankee Stadium. See it?
Yep.
It's an angle you never see.
L'chaim. To life, l'chaim.
Outside there's a boxcar waiting. Outside the family store. Out by the fire breathing. Outside we wait till face turns blue. I know the nervous walking. I know the dirty bed hangs. Out by the boxcar waiting. Take me way to nowhere place. It is a wait so long. You never wait so long. Here comes a man. Here comes a man. Here comes your man.
L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim. To life, l'chaim.
Seelig Freund was born on November 11, 1912. The son of Jewish immigrants, he learned the value of education and hard work at an early age, finding interest in a variety of academic subjects. His intellectual curiosity would remain with him throughout his life, paving the way for him to become a surgeon of unusual skill and a father of judicious advice. Our story begins at the turn of the 20th century in Belarus, where Seelig's parents were being persecuted for their Jewish heritage. Seelig's father, Oscar, was drafted into the Tsar's army and stationed in Poland, where his corrupt officers frequently stole his pay. Meanwhile, Rose was subject to even more severe forms of discrimination, as one night she and her family narrowly escaped an angry mob of Cossacks burning down Jewish villages in Odessa, White Russia. Weary of such intolerable conditions, Rose and Oscar joined thousands of disenfranchised Jews in turning their eyes west. There they saw a country thriving on principles of liberty and equality, promising a better life for future generations. They immigrated to America by ship, able only to afford passage in the overcrowded steerage compartment. In 1905, completely unbeknownst to each other, both Rose McCasey and Oscar Freund arrived at Ellis Island, New York. Shortly after their arrival, they were introduced through family friends and were married in 1907. Rose gave birth to her first son, Max, in January of 1909. 3 years later, Seelig was born on the kitchen table of a small apartment in the Bronx, which at the time was a largely rural but rapidly developing area. His parents nicknamed him Saul, because the family name Seelig, with 2 E's, proved to be difficult to spell. Having little money but wanting their children to succeed, Rose and Oscar insisted that both Seelig and Max learn English. From a young age, English would be the children's primary language, though they still spoke Yiddish within the household.
My father came over here as an immigrant, and he went to work immediately selling cloth for people to be able to make suits on the Lower East Side. And later on, he bought his own business, and he sold, cloth material to manufacturers. Years later, around 1918, right after the war, the Jews of Europe were doing very poorly, and my father, who was not a rich man, volunteered to go over to Europe with a joint distribution committee to bring refugees back. He stayed there about a year, and we didn't know until he came back he'd been sick over there. He looked like a ghost when he came back, but that was my father. He brought back several relatives, and that was Papa. But when he came back, he found that his partner had screwed him out of his business. He had to start all over again.
As parents, Oscar and Rose put a strong emphasis on academic excellence, insisting that the boys use their education as a means to opening the doors of opportunity. Both Seelig and Max excelled in the classroom, attending Public School 44 and later Morris High School. In addition to educational values, Rose and Oscar also taught their children the importance of family.
They both were great parents. My brother and I were born not long after they got married, and we never had a sense of sibling rivalry. And I attribute that to the fact that my parents never discriminated one against the other. They treated us all with great equality. We used to play touch football in the streets of the Bronx, and I went out to get a pass, and suddenly, coming around the corner, a wagon with a horse galloping ahead of it. It was a coffee wagon, and the horse knocked me down, trampled me, and both wheels went over my back. It's a miracle I didn't have a crushed chest. At any rate, I couldn't get up, and a few kids went a few blocks to pick up my older brother, Max. Max came. He'd always been my big brother, my savior, and he carried me home. And it shows you how, in those days, people were not litigious. My parents could have had an action against the coffee wagon because he was galloping around the corner instead of going slowly. But they never sued, and I gradually got better, and I returned to school.
During his teenage years at Morris High School, Seelig proved to be a natural-born learner with a drive to succeed. It wasn't long before he distinguished himself as one of the top students in his class. Seelig also found the time to play soccer and even encountered the likes of a future baseball Hall of Famer.
Grandpa, you want to tell us about playing on the soccer team? And
Yeah,
about the time you played against Hank Greenberg?
Well, I don't want to drop names. We kept winning. We went up to the city finals, and we finally played against James Monroe High School. It was noteworthy that playing fullback on the James Monroe High School team was Hank Greenberg. We used to call him Bruggy Greenberg, B-R-U-G-G-Y. He went on to have a stellar baseball career playing for the Detroit team. Anyway, he played fullback, I played outside right, and James Monroe High School beat us by 1 goal. He was about 6'4" and solid. I was a kid, if I weighed more than 119 pounds, it was a lot. Running into him was like running into a brick wall.
Seelig's preoccupation with sports and academics left him little time to explore other aspects of adolescence, particularly the art of engaging the opposite sex.
Tell us about Jewish girls when you were in high school and college and you were dating them.
I weren't dating because I didn't have many dates because my parents' friends didn't have any daughters.
But tell us the difference between Jewish girls and Catholic girls at the time.
Well, they used to say a Jewish girl doesn't give a fuck. Jewish girls were not promiscuous, and most of the guys that got laid went out with shiksas. We used to say that the mottos of a Jewish girl were no chuppah, no shtuppah. A chuppah is a wedding canopy, and shtuppah means getting screwed.
Despite such obstacles, on one occasion, Seelig shined as a genuine playboy in front of his peers.
They finally had a dance for the seniors in the high school gym. And I forgot what the name of the dance was. You get the girls to walk around the music in one direction. They're lined up in a circle. And the men are lined up in the circle inside. And when the music stops, you dance with the person that's opposite you. And I ended up with one of the most beautiful girls on campus, and she taught me how to dance. We danced all afternoon, and when I got through, I knew how to dance. I had never danced before.
When the school day was over, Seelig worked at the Polo Grounds, the baseball stadium of the New York Giants.
During the Depression, when I was in high school, I wanted to make some money. I got a job carrying soda pop and hot dogs in the Polo Grounds. I was assigned to the upper stands, and the steps were very steep. It was very vigorous exercise carrying soda pop up to the fans there.
Since then, the Polo Grounds have been torn down and replaced by city housing. In 1929, Seelig graduated from Morris High School. Looking to pursue further academic goals, he attended New York University's College of Arts and Sciences. At the time, NYU's campus was located in the Uptown Heights area of the Bronx. Although the site is now home to Bronx Community College, many aspects of the original campus remain intact.
I'm standing at the door of the Gould Memorial Library. This is the library of this university college, which was called University College of Arts and Pure Science. It's now part of Bronx Community College. This was a magnificent library at one time. It had great architectural features, and it was used for study halls for the students here. I spent many a day studying. I'm sort of disappointed to see that the building is now essentially empty and not being used at all. Oh, it was great. This was a small campus, a very good faculty. Classes were small, and you got to know your professors very well. It was the professor of history who used to go with me to Jacob Schiff Center to play handball. And every once in a while he wanted some more strenuous exercise. He'd invite me to wrestle with him. I think I told you later, I wrestled with him and I happened to get a scissor grip around him. And with the scissor grip, I squeezed his belly, let out the biggest fart I've ever heard. And funny, he was pretty deaf. So after he farted, he looked around to see whether I heard it. I heard it. This place was the original Hall of Fame. It was called the Hall of Great Americans, or the Hall of Famous Americans. And it's a rotunda filled with busts and brass plates underneath it. It has famous American authors, politicians, philosophers, and so on. After all, they built other Hall of Fames throughout the United States, but they never duplicated this.
I have to say this, but you can't say they built other Hall of Fames. They built other Halls of Fame.
You're right.
Okay, you have to get the grammar right, please.
I'm glad you corrected me. They built other Halls of Fame.
About once per year, I get the opportunity to correct my father's grammar. The rest of the time, he corrects mine. Is this where the view was?
The view is from here, but I don't remember trees growing this tall. And I don't remember a building over there. That building was not there. From here, you could see across the Harlem River.
I can kind of see the tops of the Palisades right through the trees, but I can't see
Jane Addams. She lived till 1935.
So, Dad, is this where you studied some of the Shakespeare plays?
Oh yes, in
So
English.
You used to know some of the major Shakespeare passages.
That's
Do you still
right.
remember any?
I remember a couple.
What do you remember?
I think the prologue, the Henry V. Oh, for muse a fire that will send the brightest heavens of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Harry himself assume the port of Mars, and at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, I forgot what else. Okay, I'm ready to leave.
In 1933, Seelig graduated from NYU. With a variety of opportunities to explore, he found himself face to face with one of the most pivotal decisions of his life.
When the time came for me to graduate from college, I didn't know whether I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer. I had a scientific background and I had a background in the liberal arts, so I could qualify for both. So in order to hedge, I applied to Harvard Law School, to NYU Medical School. Within a short period of time, I got into both Harvard Law and NYU Med. Then I was in a quandary. What should I do? I've been accepted at both places, so I said, well, we're already a small family. You have a lawyer in the family. We might as well have a doctor in the family. So that's why I became a doctor.
After 4 years of rigorous study, Seelig graduated from NYU Medical School in 1937. His career continued to advance as he promptly completed an internship and part of a surgical residency at Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan.
They ran some competitive exams for residency, and it was first they filled up the auditorium with a couple of hundred applicants, and then they broke them down to 36. They gave oral exams, and I picked 18. I took first place on the exam. They said you could have any appointment you wanted. I took the first year in bacteriology and pathology, so I did a lot of bacteriology, and I also did a lot of autopsies.
However, because Mount Sinai did not offer a complete surgical residency, Seelig had to apply to other hospitals to finish his training. Unfortunately, the only two hospitals in New York to offer a full residency program heavily discriminated against Jewish applicants. Stymied at every corner, Seelig finally accepted an offer to teach anatomy at NYU Medical School. It was during Seelig's experience as an anatomy professor that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and the United States' involvement in the Second World War began.
I had extensive training in surgery after I graduated from New York University College of Medicine. And when the war broke out, my head of the department wanted to have me declared essential so I could not be drafted. And I said to him, if we Jews don't volunteer for service at this time when Hitler is trying to destroy them all, who should? So I said, I'm volunteering.
Seelig was initially stationed in the Brooklyn Naval Yard, where his medical knowledge went largely overlooked.
I got fed up. I went to the port surgeon, and I told him that I volunteered because I wanted to be assigned to a surgical unit. And all you got me doing is examining galleys for cockroaches and vermin. That's not what I'm trained for. He said, all right, we'll take care of it, Doc. Instead, they assigned me to the worst rust pot of a ship that the New York port of embarkation was getting rid of because the Navy had already rejected it.
After working aboard many ships, Seelig's talents were finally recognized by the Army, who assigned him to the SS Argentina as a surgeon. While aboard this transport vessel, Seelig looked after the health of the Allied troops. Seelig also experienced a variety of once-in-a-lifetime encounters that would provide comical tales for years to come.
We had lunch in some French restaurant in Dakar, and then he asked the waiter, where's a good place to have dinner? The waiter said, go to Madame Lily's So when time came to go to dinner, we took a cab. We went to Madame Lily's. It was a very imposing townhouse which said Lily Cernay, C-E-R-N-A-Y. It's funny how I remember that so many years later. We went inside, and it was obvious that it was a whorehouse. There was a big anteroom with a black man with a big fez on top standing behind a bar serving drinks, and in the back a lot of very handsome French women walking around with low-cut gowns, and it was a big room with Japanese lanterns, and on the sides were private rooms where the girls would take their customers. This fellow was getting recurrent gonorrhea all the time. By the time we got to Dakar, I had him cleared up. And he was at this place having dinner too. I noticed that in the middle of dinner, he was walking next to my table with a prostitute. They were going to go into a private room. I said, "Walter, you're going to be sorry. Don't do it." So he looked at me and he walked on. About a half hour later, he came back very sheepish, walked by me, said, "God damn it, Freund, you said I'd be sorry for it, and it really affected me." He said, "I couldn't get laid. I went dead in the hole." I have another story about venereal disease. This was told to me by a medical officer. He served in North Africa after the invasion. When the troops settled in there, no longer any fighting, a lot of the troops came down with venereal disease. North Africa had been occupied by the French. It was filled with houses of prostitution. So this medical officer went up to General Patton, who was the commanding general at the time, and asked him to close down the houses of prostitution because he was getting too many cases of VD to treat. And he said the general refused to close them down. He said, "Doctor, soldiers who can't fuck won't fight."
During the final year of the war, Seelig became the chief Allied medical officer aboard the Queen Mary.
I gradually worked my way up and ended up with one of the best ships in the fleet. It was the old Queen Mary.
Prior to the war, the Queen Mary had been the largest and fastest ocean liner in the world, capable of carrying over 3,000 passengers and traveling over 30 knots.
I made 22 round trips across the North Atlantic 44 times. And I must say, I didn't get seasick at all. On my first trip abroad, when the first ship, when we were going down to Trinidad, when we passed Cape Hatteras, I think that's off the Carolinas, it got quite rough. I lost my appetite, but I didn't upchuck, and that was it.
During the war, the ship was converted into a troop transport vessel. Its festive white, red, and black coloring was painted over a dull gray, making it difficult for U-boats to see, and earning its nickname, the Gray Ghost. As the build-up for D-Day progressed, the Queen carried 12,000 healthy American soldiers from the United States to England, and on its return voyages brought many wounded soldiers back home. Unlike his days at the Brooklyn Naval Yard, Seelig's experience aboard the Queen Mary allowed him to utilize the full breadth of his medical training.
I can tell you something more interesting scientifically, how I stopped a potential epidemic aboard a ship. There was a soldier who was comatose. I went down there and found that his body was rigid. I could not flex his neck or his arms, and his skin was hot. Obviously, he had high fever. I slowly pried his mouth open, looked at his throat, which was very red and inflamed. I took him up to the sick bay, did a spinal tap on him, and found a lot of pus cells. Whenever I went to sea, I always had a microscope with me, and I always had material to stain bacteria. I did what was known as a gram stain. I did a gram stain on this young kid who I made a diagnosis of meningitis and found what is known as gram-negative diplococci, which is the organism of meningococcus that causes epidemic meningitis. And bacterial meningitis can spread like a wildfire aboard ship. It so happens before the days of penicillin, I gave him intravenous sulfadiazine in large doses, and I pulled him through. I was afraid of getting an epidemic. And if you have an epidemic before a ship and thousands of troops sleeping in close quarters, and I went up to the commanding general. I said, "General, I want you to make sure that all your platoon leaders have a large supply of this medication I'm going to give you, and make sure that they give the troops 2 pills every 6 hours by the clock." But it's not enough to give them the 2 pills because they're a bunch of kids. The platoon leader has to see the soldier swallow it. The general says, "Suppose I don't do that." I said, "General, if you get an epidemic amount of meningitis here, you won't have any troops to command anymore." So he said, that convinced him. He said, "All right, we'll do it." And we never had an epidemic.
When someone lives as long as Dr. Freund lives, he's able to relate stories that sound like they come from another world just because of his trajectory through the changing face of medicine. And certainly one of them is managing the troops during World War II at a time when antibiotics didn't exist.
Here he was, the only doctor on this enormous ship. He was trained as a surgeon and was performing operations, but he also was able to do a gram stain and diagnose pneumococcal meningitis on his own.
And I believe he spent the great majority of his days on ship treating soldiers with the tools available at the time, which involved placing all kinds of toxic, I believe, mercury and arsenic-containing compounds up those soldiers' internal plumbing via the route that you might expect to treat their genital disease, and watching them squirm as they retained this caustic substance inside their private parts until it could do its job. I don't think this was his idea of why he got into medicine, but it occupied a fair percentage of his time on board ship.
When Sir Alexander Fleming was my guest for a drink aboard the Queen Mary, he told me he had had a very interesting trip to the United States. By this time, I was a senior Allied medical officer aboard the Queen Mary, and I had a stateroom on main deck. British ships were wet. Officers got a ration of whiskey, which you could never get aboard an American ship because American ships were supposed to be dry. At any rate, I always had a supply of whiskey. Incidentally, Johnny Walker, red label, was about 75 cents. At any rate, so I invited Sir Alexander Fleming to my stateroom for a drink. And he said, "Dr. Freund, my government sent me to the United States to investigate the industrial production of penicillin." He said, "I've visited every well-known pharmaceutical house in the country, and I found a small company in Brooklyn, New York. It's not a pharmaceutical house. It specializes in making ferments for the beer industry." He said, "That company can make more and better penicillin than all the other pharmaceutical houses combined." I said, "What's the name of that company?" He said, "I've never heard of it. The company's name is Pfizer." When I got out of medical school, I took a residency, and all I did was studied my ass off. I had no business experience. Had I had that, I would have known to invest in Pfizer. In fact, the thought occurred to me that I should go over to Pfizer in Brooklyn and see whether I could buy their stock, except that I never had any money because my salary as an intern was $15 a month. That didn't go very far. And I didn't know that I could borrow money to invest. I think my son told me that later. I could have borrowed money from my brother and then invested in Pfizer. If I did that, I'd be on Easy Street today.
In 1944, while the Queen Mary was being reprovisioned in New York Harbor, Seelig was set up on a blind date with Charmian Litt Kaplan. The vivacious daughter of an architect, Charmian was refined in ways that Seelig was not.
I worked at the New York Port of Embarkation, Brooklyn Army Base, and a fellow medical officer there by the name of Sidney Morse. I used to go out to sea and come back, and I didn't have much of a social life. And Sidney Moore said, I have a very nice cousin of my wife I'd like you to meet. So he arranged for me to have a blind date at their apartment in the Bronx. And as usual, I came a little late, and we hit it off very well.
The couple fell in love almost immediately and were married on July 8, 1945, after only 7 dates. A year later, Seelig received an honorable discharge from the Army, leaving with the rank of lieutenant colonel. Continuing to pursue his career, he entered into a new surgical residency at Mount Sinai Hospital, the first full program in New York City that did not use a Jewish quota. In 1949, Seelig completed his medical training at age 36, finally realizing his long-pursued dream of becoming a board-certified surgeon. For the remainder of his career, Seelig would work alongside his mentor, Dr. Leon Ginsberg, at Beth Israel Hospital in downtown Manhattan.
Grandpa, would you like to maybe tell us about a few of the surgeries you performed regularly and like what you would
Well,
do?
don't forget, in my era, kids didn't super specialize to learn 1 or 2 operations they did all the time. We had to learn to do everything.
He was the kind of doctor that you just don't see anymore. You know, these days everybody's very specialized. There's a lot of ancillary support.
We did hernia repairs. We'd get up at night to do appendectomies, but during the day we did elective procedures, we did colon resection. Now, Dr. Ginsberg did an enormous number of colon resections. In the early of my career, I worked with him and he described something like 1,061 consecutive colon resections in 1,000 patients with colon cancer. So we had enormous experience operating for colon cancer. Well, after we published the first 1,000, we probably did another 1,000 because he was doing colon resections all the time. In addition to that, general surgeons removed gallbladders because patients have gallstone attacks. So we did cholecystectomies, that's what it's called. If a patient became jaundiced from gallstones, you'd have to operate and open up the ducts that drain the liver, open up and take the stones out.
My first experience in medicine was through Dr. Freund. He did something which was, I suspect, even fairly daring in his time, and certainly would be considered a little unusual under the current medical climate, of taking a college undergraduate into the medical center with him and into the operating room with him, and allowing me to participate in operations, albeit in a somewhat limited fashion, primarily through holding retractors and cutting sutures, etc. But nonetheless, for someone who was 2 years out of high school, this was rather an eye-opening experience.
One Monday, and don't ask me what year it was, but Dr. Freund had 3 or 4 cases, and there was also a medical board meeting at 4 o'clock that day. So he's prancing around this area saying, for Christ's sake, how am I going to get to a meeting? And Pat Weiland, who was the manager at the time, she said, very simply, Seelig, we're locking the door and you're going from room to room to room, which you did, because he used to like to take a little time between cases, too much time from the nursing point of view, but I'll always remember that. He went from here to room 2 to room 3, and he got to the medical board meeting at 5 after 4.
So I do remember him taking me into the OR to operate on a gentleman with a presumptive diagnosis of a very unusual disorder, and when it was confirmed, his obvious satisfaction in having made this very obscure diagnosis, despite the reservations of his colleagues who had doubted and in fact teased him about it beforehand, was quite evident. He clearly thrilled in his diagnostic acumen, and he took the liberty to shut down the whole procedure, to walk away from the table, to get the hospital paging resources to summon the doubting clinicians who had questioned his acumen.
I asked this before, but I'm going to ask it a slightly different way. Was there a single case that was the most interesting of your career where, you know, it presented as one thing but it turned out to be something else, or anything like that?
All the cases were interesting. I'm sorry I'm so cockeyed, but I cannot make both of my eyes go parallel. I should have had surgery as a kid.
Obviously, one of the things that we all wondered about is how a physician whose one eye was straight ahead and whose second eye was gazing somewhere in right field could manage to have the binocular vision you needed for depth perception, or whether this was in fact one of his secret weapons where he could keep an eye on two areas at the same time. I assume it was the latter, because obviously if it was the former, his career wouldn't have flourished the way it did. And when he was in full swing in medicine, I believe he was one of the top 2 or 3 most successful, well-known, and I think reimbursed physicians in New York City, which is saying something.
One of his favorite comments in the OR was, for Christ's sake, fix the light. Now we have light covers that the surgeons can fix their own light, because it was the lights were just never good enough. So now it's all in the surgeons.
Right.
See how far we've gone in progress in the OR.
One of the favorite things I liked to do when I was operating with a resident, and point out to the resident where he could make a mistake. If you do this, this is what the consequence will be. If you don't do this, you'll have a free, uncomplicated recovery. Oh, it's confusing. It's so many years since I've been back here, I've forgotten how most of it looks. The place was much more simple when I was here. To life, l'chaim, 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 to life. Victory for everybody.
In the summer of 1952, Charm gave birth to their first child, Debbie. And in November of the following year, she gave birth to their second child, John. During Debbie's birth, Seelig was forced to make a difficult choice between his growing practice and family life at home.
I was a young doctor. I didn't have much of a practice, and when somebody referred a case to me, I was eager to have it. This fellow had a big practice, and he wanted me to take off a cyst from the ear of Jackie Gleason. I said, I can't do it. I said, my wife is about to have a baby. He said, well, she's the first baby. She won't have it so long. You'll have plenty of time to do it and then get to see her. So he insisted. I went ahead and did it in the patient's regular room in doctor's hospital, and it was all right. And when I got through, I found out that Debbie had already been delivered. I could have brained Jackie Gleason. Why he had to have it done then, I don't know.
Poppy was the ultimate feminist. About age 4, he started talking to me about things like, women can do anything they want. I believe you can achieve anything you want to achieve. He started talking to me at 4 years old about getting an education. Here was a successful doctor who everybody would have thought would have been busy in the OR. When I needed him, he sat down with me until the middle of the night. He encouraged me. He just somehow knew that he wanted me to have every opportunity, and he was giving me that range of choices. Now that's the good part. The bad part, he will absolutely tell you what he thinks about life or about you, whether you want to hear it or not.
You look very well, except you have fat cheeks.
Well, I'm doing great. So, pretty much every time I see my grandfather, he reminds me that I need to exercise. It's very important.
Watch out for your diet.
Yeah.
When you satisfy your hunger, quit.
Yeah. He's the kind of guy who will really tell you what he thinks is best for you, even if it's like, you know, maybe not the most conventional thing to say. He never has a problem telling me he thinks I'm overweight, you know, like he just would never even think twice. He says, Zan, get rid of that.
If you want to live to my age, you better work on getting rid of some of the schmaltz on your body.
He has absolutely no tact. Another way is he may be out to dinner and somebody will say, well, how's your food, Seelig? Hoping that, you know, I suppose that they enjoy it. He say, oh, that piece of fish is mediocre.
The soup was mediocre.
Anytime Dad says anything, he's a broken record about it.
Have you seen?
Steak is tough, you know. Steak is no good. Too tough. Thanks some of it. I don't like it. Too tough.
You don't like it?
Steak is tough. It's a lousy steak. It's a tough steak. Not very tasty. Thank you.
Sorry about the steak. Was the sushi okay?
What?
I'm sorry about the steak, but was the sushi okay?
The steak?
You like the sushi?
The steak was no good.
I know. Do you like the sushi?
What?
Do you like the sushi at
The
least?
sushi was good. I like the sushi. The sushi was, I hardly ate the steak. I gave it away. It's too tough, with not much taste, and it was too hard to chew.
It turns out he doesn't like any food. Although anything in a restaurant is better than my mother cooked, and he couldn't even cook an egg, so he can't, you know, really complain. There's no food he likes, but he has no tact whatsoever in that situation either. I was 12 or 13, and John was, you know, a year and a half younger, and we're sitting at the dinner table one night, and he says, I think it's time to get John a jockstrap. And he says, and now that I think about it, Charm, do you think Debbie is ready for a training bra? To which I said, I turned purple, and I said, Dad, not at the dinner table.
I'm now going back to my children's childhood, not to my own. My kids played in this playground when we lived at 17 East 96th Street. My wife used to take the kids to the playground all the time, and it was a happy time. Life was much less complicated than it is now. That sun feels good. I'll get a little color in my face for a change. Everybody tells me I'm too pale.
When I was growing up, it was awesome how much he knew about an incredible variety of things. I'd ask my mother, because my father was never home until dinner time, because he was always, you know, working down the hospital. So I'd come home from school and I'd always be curious, and I'd ask my mother a bunch of questions about all kinds of things. About 90% of the time she'd say, that's an ADD, that's Ask Daddy's department. And sure enough, he would know all the time. Of course, he reads the New York Times essentially cover to cover every day. He was always curious about everything. We didn't watch Jeopardy together because Jeopardy wasn't on in those days, but he would have been an absolute killer Jeopardy player.
1977 film in which Luke Skywalker uses the Force.
He had definitely grown up in an environment where if he hadn't gotten a good education, had done well in school, he would be poor like his father was, and he was pushed to get a great education and to really do a lot with it. So he pushed me. When I was a kid, he spent about, I think, a half a day a week working down at a place in the Lower East Side of New York called the Workman's Circle, which was a free clinic for members of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union and other people who didn't have a lot of money. And he would basically go down there and work and donate his time for many, many years, I mean, really for decades, because that's the culture in which he was raised. In the years before Medicare, doctors got actually a pretty handsome living from fairly wealthy patients if they had wealthy patients. He had a patient named Joe Glazer who was the founder of a talent agency called the Associated Booking Corp, which was the largest booker of jazz bands and other entertainment. You know, they had Louis Armstrong and many of the big jazz acts at the time. Joe Glazer thought that my dad had saved his life by operating on him a couple of times, and was a very grateful patient.
And very often he called me up and he asked me what I'd like to see a prize fight at Madison Square Garden. I would go with him. I would always sit at the ringside. One time, he asked me to go to a fight with him. It was a championship fight between a Puerto Rican and a Dick Tiger, an African. We got there, and he said to me, Doc, that's what he called me, he said, I won't be able to sit with you today. I'm sitting at the ringside with Ed Sullivan. So he said, in the meantime, I want to meet a friend of mine. And the friend of his turned out to be the head of the mafia, Frank Costello.
Joe said to my dad, you're in very good hands. You're going to sit with a friend of mine. But listen, Doc, tonight, because I'm not with you, when my friend tells you to do something, you do it. And when my friend tells you to leave, you leave.
And he left the ringside, and I said to my friend, let's wait a while till we see the end of the fight. We saw the end of the fight, and then we ran to the door before the referee raised his arm up. And when the referee raised his arm up, and Dick Tiger, the African, had won, pop bottles started coming down from all over Madison Square Garden, and people sitting at the ringside had to hide underneath the ring. Because the Puerto Ricans didn't like the idea that African beat a Puerto Rican.
I mean, I don't really know how it came up, but, you know, we just decided, well, he likes golf, maybe he'll like miniature golf. Problem was he didn't really like miniature golf, and not only that, but, you know, he made it very well known from the beginning.
So I think we're all going miniature golfing later?
What?
I think we're all going to go miniature golfing later this afternoon. Are you going to come?
Miniature golf?
Yeah.
No, you kids can do it. I'll stay home.
Oh, okay. I think my dad was going to come home and he wanted us all to go, maybe. I'm not sure. That's what Zan's saying.
Well, it's very noisy on the highway over here. I'm trying to play some golf in the meantime.
Are you having fun, Seelig?
Move that black ball. Black ball shot.
I don't regard it as a good game. Oh, you aim it, you hit it hard, but you would never hit that way on a golf course. Get past barriers, and it bounces over barriers, and it comes into a trap and runs through a hole, which never would exist on a golf course, and ends up for you to putt. It's true. And a soft voice, though. Don't be a shouter like the rest of the family.
He was the one who held you. It was you. The baby was Alexander. He held you for your circumcision with the rabbi, and he was just really involved. And so after you were born, it was even better. Then he'd come by even more times a week because he wanted to visit with you and really be a part of your life. So right at the very beginning, he was, you know, he wasn't afraid to hold you. A lot of grandparents, your grandmother was afraid to hold you. But Seelig couldn't get enough of you. And he used to come and he just watched you grow through that first year.
He's a cutie. I don't want to look cockeyed on the film. You like that? Huh? You like that? Okay, I think we've done pretty well by him. Okay, how about... Oh, geez, how about that? You gotta get a picture of you.
Okay, Alexander. And then when I got pregnant with Nicholas, we had to move out to the suburbs. And he was so sad because it meant he wouldn't be able to stop by anymore, and it was just going to be like a weekend thing.
All right, children, come on, it doesn't matter. It should be the way it
It's
is.
straight, it's straight.
Now, I got, Grandma and I have one present for each one of you, exactly the same. Wait a second. Wait, we're gonna have a guessing game.
Oh. What do you
I'm gonna
think?
each a guess.
I picked that one. I picked that
Okay, you know, but what do you think's inside?
one. A toy.
Oh, no.
Out of your
come on,
nose,
give me a
Alexander.
toy. What do I like to do with you kids?
Out behind our house,
What
Alexander.
does Grandma like to do?
What did you like to do with me the last few weeks when I came to visit?
It has bases. Let me give you a hint.
It has bases? What could it be? Yeah, and a real one this
real one,
time.
not a kid's
Oh my gosh, those are great
Look at
ones.
that. Oh, they're fantastic. Where did
Look
you
at that.
find it?
When we all got together as families, it was as if all the sibling rivalry that goes along with a family and all the little tiffs and things that seem to matter so much when they're happening would just fade away. And we did a lot of laughing. Seelig got into this thing one day where he kind of started up a new tradition, which was the telling of dirty limericks.
I mean, they're pretty funny and they're pretty obscene. My grandmother wouldn't even let him tell them to us when we were kids.
Every so often when he'd get going, often with Uncle Max around, you'd get him started on these dirty limericks and he would just go at it with this real, just, you know, boyish grin on his face.
Someone like my dad, really eggs him on to tell these dirty limericks, which he clearly, his face just lights up and he really loves to tell them.
Like there's this one that he loves to tell. There once was a man from Dundee
who buggered an ape in a tree. The result, it was horrid. All ass and no forward, blue balls and a purple goatee. You know, I usually don't say this in mixed company, but my son is stimulating me to do things that is really against my nature.
You better stop.
Anyway, there's a limerick called, "There was a young man from Dundee whose penis was so long."
No.
This is the best one. There was a young man from Kent whose penis was so long it was bent. To save himself trouble, he put it in double, and instead of coming, he went.
But the best one was this limerick that went, there once were 3 maids from Birmingham.
You heard the story concerning him. They lifted the frock and twiddled the cock of the bishop as he was confronting him. Now, Bishop was no bloody fool. He'd been to a royal public school. So he pulled down his breeches and bucketed the bitches with royal episcopal tool.
Great.
I don't know whether I want to be recorded on this.
Too late.
Bonus footage.
You've told that story in polite company ever since I can remember.
On a beautiful Sunday afternoon, my son John and my daughter Debbie gave me a present of a brand new racing bike. And I could not wait till I get up on the bike, although I knew going in a crowded Sunday afternoon, some idiot tried to get through me and the person next to me was 5 inches apart. And 5 feet ahead of us was another line of bikes. He couldn't make any headway. Anyway, I enjoyed balancing myself on the bike, and suddenly out of nowhere, a guy comes from behind and knocked me off my bike and broke my right elbow. I was in a cast for a few weeks. My wife said to me, "That's enough of riding a bike on a Sunday afternoon. Get somebody to cover your weekends and let's join a club." It so happens my brother, Max, was the president of this club. So I applied, and within a few weeks I was admitted.
18th tee, 338 yards. Par 3. Seelig Freund, little right to left break here. He's gonna pull out a 2-iron here. Oh! This shot does not look good. It looks like a break. Oh, he has got a break. It has rolled on the fairway. In the fairway, second shot.
Let's take
for
a
double
break
eagle.
and put on your
For-
roll of putting
for-
on some
For
pajamas.
birdie here. Oh, this is a brilliant shot, right where he wanted it. It lands back green.
doing?
I think he's imitating you.
Imitating who?
You.
I don't act that way.
In the bed. Let's take your medicine. I don't want to go in the bed.
Willie, you gotta take your medicine. Come on.
No, last time.
Hilarious.
Okay.
Okay, you're turning it off?
Yep, no more.
Okay.
Unless you want to watch more.
Keep blowing your inhaler into his nose.
Yep. Flow vent, I
He's
think.
got a little asthma. Okay.
So my name's Karen. I've been teaching Dr. Freund for about 4 years now.
Wow.
And I would say at 92, he's playing the best golf I've seen in 4 years.
That's because he has a good teacher. You want to see him when he was a surgeon. He spent 60 hours a week in the operating room. So
Wow.
he did that very well, too. Guys. Very professional.
Okay. So what's going on with you? Regards to your wife.
Okay. See you soon.
Quite the flattery.
Okay. He's a fabulous
Everywhere we go, everyone just can't stop talking.
All right, nice seeing you. Good to see you. Well,
Running into some old friends, huh?
Karen, can we take the
Yes. Yeah, it's
take
the
it
last
back?
part there.
Okay, now maybe we'll take a lunch break, yeah?
Yeah. You hit the ball really well, Grandpa. Yeah, very impressed. So the last question
What?
that we're going to ask you this whole time, okay?
What is it?
Because I know you miss her so much and loved her so much, I just want you to tell us a little bit so we can include it about Grandma.
Our grandma was an all-around gal. She loved sports, and she became an avid Yankee fan. When she got to know George Steinbrenner's wife. I hadn't seen George Steinbrenner in a while, and I said hello to him, and I sat in his box during the game with the boys.
Yes, yes.
It was fun.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, this guy, she used to get, when they won the series, she got the necklace like the player's wife. I swear, his wife.
It would take us quite some time to get to George Steinbrenner's office because everyone on the corridor was sub-charm the schmooze with her. And she was a big schmoozer. And after she met them first time, she remembered all their names. We could go to a party. I made 10 new people. And on the way out, when she said goodbye, she'd say goodbye to them all by their first names. And she met them weeks later on Park Avenue or any other place, she'd still remember their names. It was a great attribute she had. Oh, she was a great companion. I have nothing else to write. I'm thinking of my first date with my wife. We each had a drink. We toasted each other with the words that came from me at least, l'chaim, l'chaim. And I always make it guttural with the ch, okay? It means to life.
They often fought about this or that. It could be something as simple as my mother, who was just so about everything, and Dad, who tended to be a little messier. Seelig, clean up that dresser. And she would badger him until he cleaned it up. And he would say, Charm, I had a hard day in the office. Can't you give me a break? And it would be like that all the time. But I think that they were really so in love and very codependent on each other in a way that they'd never realized.
once my sister and I had left the house and they had an empty nest, I came to realize that the bickering was just their style of getting along, and that they were really incredibly codependent on each other. Their apartment in New York, where he lives when he's in New York now, is really like a shrine to Grandma now. He has reconstituted in his mind everything about her. He has forgotten that they ever bickered. She is the perfect person, the perfect mother, the perfect wife, and of course had the perfect apartment, and the perfect apartment cannot have anything changed in it at all. It's really a museum to the way it was when she was alive and living there, and how meticulous she was at picking all the decorations and cleaning up all the time.
Before Mrs. Freund died, and she told me, if I die, please, Sophia, take care about my husband. Don't live alone. So promise me. I say, I don't have to promise you, but if you die, I'm going to do all that I have to do with Dr. Freund, because he's a lovely person.
What's nice during the week is that you come here, but on the weekend it's empty.
I know.
You're not here. She goes to church all the time on the weekends.
Yes, I miss you too. Every weekend. I try to do all healthy food, you know, not too fat, little fruits, cereal, oatmeal every day.
Irish oatmeal.
Yeah.
He won't stop talking about it.
Yeah. And coffee, he likes 2 or 3 cups of coffee in the morning, wow. But I only give once. Yes, when he say another cup of coffee, I said, no, I have fruit for you.
Okay, I don't think I'll see you. I'm going to the radiologist, okay. So I'll give you a hug and a kiss. Oh. That's the best part. I love to hug you. It's so good.
Love you so much. Take care.
Right.
It's like my father, yeah. So I'm trying to make the best for him.
Here I am sitting in my living room at 1185 Park Avenue. You recording?
Yes, I am. So
here I'm sitting in the living room of my apartment, 3F, 1185 Park Avenue, with Winslow Porter and my grandson, Alexander Freund. They're home from school, which hasn't started yet, and so they're at loose ends, and they're trying to make a movie and see what they have any talent at it.
He was just such a trooper during the whole process, you know. I mean, here we have it, like, you know, he has a lot of trouble walking, he has a lot of trouble keeping his balance now, but he is such a, you know, inspirational force for me, because I see this guy who, like, it must hurt every step he takes. You can tell he's like, you know, he's having trouble, but he just keeps on moving. He just keeps on walking.
What's going to be very corny?
All the old picture movies.
Why would it be corny?
About me. I don't think there's anything interesting about me. I think you might as well turn it off. You're wasting film.
Why do you think it's a waste?
You've taken me so many times before. I think that's enough. I don't want to. You'll find this a very boring movie.
Daddy, he's going to cut it. Don't worry.
There's nothing very interesting. Talking about myself, I don't find interesting.
You have good presence.
Really?
Yeah.
I never thought of that.
We've had fun with this, haven't we?
What?
We've had a lot of fun with this, haven't we?
Yeah.
So how have you liked having these guys following you around with the camera?
No. Between you and me was a pain in the ass. Don't tell me.
What's that?
Oh, here we are on the tram going to Roosevelt Island. It's now August the 11th at 4:30 in the afternoon. Winslow and Alexander are hoping to make a documentary about me. What they intend to do, I don't have the faintest idea.
Well, my father tends to repeat himself. All summer long, I would remind him that this movie was going to be filmed beginning August 5th in New York, and every single time I'd say it, he'd say, "Why do they want to make a movie about me?" And I'd explain it. And the next time I talked to him, he would say, tell me about this movie. I'm not sure why they should make a movie about me, so I tell him about the movie. And then I talk to him again, and he'd say, why are they making a movie about me? When we would get into the movie, he would, in the first few days of it, say, I don't think anyone's going to want to watch this movie. And I'd say, and I frankly had no clue whether this was just going to be for the family or whether this was, going to be entered in Sundance or, Cannes or God knows what. But I'd say, Dad, I don't know if anyone outside the family is ever going to want to see this movie, but I want to see the movie. So please cooperate with the movie. And Alexander wants to see the movie, and he's your grandson, and you'll have a fun time getting to know Alexander as part of the movie. After the main part of the movie was filmed, he said, it was really fun to have Alexander Winslow living there. I really felt I got to know Alexander better than ever before.
It was fun.
Having fun?
Yeah, enjoying it.
I told you that fun.
I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying being with the kids.
I told you that too.
I'd like to say that this is my last full day here. I've enjoyed everybody's company. My son, my grandson, and my grandson's friends. And in accordance with ancient Hebrew tradition, I like to drink a toast you. And the best toast that I can think of is the Hebrew words l'chaim. L'chaim means to life. And I can't think of any toast that's better than to life. It's certainly a hell of a lot better than cheers. Okay, l'chaim, fellows.
Everlasting summer, you can see it fading fast. So you grab a piece of something that you think is gonna last. Well, you wouldn't even know a diamond if you held it in your hand. The things you think are precious, I can't understand. Are you reeling in the years, stowing away the time? Are you gathering up the tears? Have you had enough of mine? Are you reeling in the years, stowing away the time? Are you gathering up the tears? Have you had enough of mine? You've been telling me you're a genius since you were 17. In all the time I've known you, I still don't know what you mean. The weekend in the college didn't turn out like you planned. The things that pass for knowledge I can't understand.